Good morning to all of you. It is a real privilege to address you today at the launch of Sri Lanka's National Strategic Action Plan to monitor and combat human trafficking for 2026-2030. Human trafficking remains a significant challenge both in Sri Lanka and globally, encompassing forced labor, sexual exploitation, forced begging, organ removal, and forced criminality within countries and across borders. Structural drivers such as economic disparities, labor migration patterns, gaps in social protection, and limited awareness continue to create the conditions where children, women, and migrant workers are vulnerable to trafficking. The number of trafficking survivors has risen sharply since the COVID-19 pandemic, where 25% increase in global detections between 2019 and 2022, and a growing number of child victims, particularly girls, whose proportion rose from 31% to 38% according to the UNODC Global Report on Trafficking of Persons in 2024. So what we are seeing is an increase particularly of the most vulnerable communities globally in this human trafficking. Sri Lanka's trafficking landscape is gendered. Men are primarily trafficked for forced labor or cybercrime. And for instance, groups of Sri Lankan nationals were trafficked to Maiwardi, Myanmar, and forced to work in illegal cybercrime operations we dealt with through coordinated rescue efforts by the Sri Lankan government, partner governments, supported by IOM and other partners. And we were able to successfully repatriate several survivors who were lured into these jobs, these situations, through extremely deceptive and exploitative recruitment schemes. This was one instance where we were able to intervene because we had the information, but there are many such instances which go unreported and unrecognized. Women and girls, on the other hand, are disproportionately trafficked for sexual exploitation, experiencing severe and distinct forms of violence, including sexual abuse, physical assault, psychological trauma, stigma, and long-term economic marginalization. Sri Lanka is not only an origin country, but also a transit hub for human trafficking due to its strategic location in South Asia, at the crossroads of major regional trade and migration routes. This location provides opportunities for economic growth, trade, and connectivity, while also making the country vulnerable to being used for human trafficking, further complicating national and regional prevention efforts. Addressing these multidimensional challenges requires a coordinated national strategy informed by evidence, aligned with international standards, and integrated with regional cooperation frameworks. This National Strategic Action Plan is crucial now as it operationalizes the 4 internationally recognized pillars of anti-trafficking strategy: prevention, protection, prosecution, and partnership, as we just saw. It aligns with key international legal and policy frameworks, including the Palermo Protocol, the Sustainable Development Goals, the Global Compact for Migration, and the Alliance 8.7 Roadmap. Strengthens Sri Lanka's engagement in regional platforms such as BIMSTEC, the Colombo Process, and the Bali Process, reinforcing the country's commitment to a cooperative, standards-based approach. At the same time, the rapid expansion of digital connectivity has introduced new modalities of exploitation, including recruitment through social media, online labor marketplaces, and cross-border cyber networks. In response, the plan incorporates artificial intelligence, open source intelligence, cybercrime coordination, digital literacy, and data-driven monitoring to enhance capacity for early detection, analysis, and intervention. Caring for trafficking survivors in Sri Lanka requires a holistic, gender-sensitive, and survivor-centered approach that addresses both immediate protection and long-term recovery, including integration back into their communities, their families, and ensuring that their economic livelihoods also are strengthened. This includes many required interventions, including safe shelter, medical care, trauma-informed psychological support, and particular attention to women and girls who experience more severe and gendered forms of violence, alongside legal assistance, economic empowerment, and skills development to prevent re-trafficking. These strategies form a core part of the country's national action plan on combating human trafficking, ensuring that survivors receive continuous, comprehensive support for sustainable reintegration and empowerment. Collectively, these measures ensure that Sri Lanka prioritizes the dignity, rights, and empowerment of survivors in its response. The implementation of the National Action Plan is central to its effectiveness, as policy frameworks alone cannot prevent or respond to trafficking without concrete operationalization. Now, all of us, or most of us in this room, know very well that Sri Lanka is very good at coming up with policies and frameworks and beautiful documents that are presented well and then get hidden away in some cupboard or in some corner and are taken out only after, the period of that document comes to an end and it's time to present a new document. And I think we need to change this. As much as we emphasize and we put the energy into producing these plans and strategies, I think greater emphasis has now to be placed on operationalizing and making sure that what we set out actually has results on the ground. And for this, I think the focus has to be on institution building, capacity building, not capacity building that just involves mindless workshops and training programs that just happen without any impact, but meaningfully building capacity of institutions and persons to deliver on these frameworks. I think this is Sri Lanka's challenge. This is where we really need to focus attention, and this requires an honest assessment of our institutional weaknesses and addressing those. Whether it's legal delays, whether it's insensitivity in police response, and this is where we are significantly, where we fail sort of spectacularly, and that is in collaboration and cooperation between agencies. I think this is a moment where this interagency and interinstitutional cooperation can really be strengthened, because as a government, we have a whole of government approach. No one is in competition with each other. No department, no ministry is in competition with each other. We all have a very clear idea of where we need to be, where we need to get to as a country, and for that, the collaboration and cooperation that is required. Institutions now have to start also recognizing this and making sure that the gaps between institutions don't create or produce the conditions where vulnerable people fall through. I have witnessed in my work in the past very often where even after people approach institutions for help, their experience becomes even more painful, even more difficult after coming into contact with the agencies that are supposedly there to support them, because of institutional weakness and because of the lack of sensitivity by those who are supposed to protect survivors. So I think this is really where we need to pay attention, and I appeal to the task force to really focus on implementation, on fixing the institutional weaknesses that prevent us from delivering on these wonderful statements that are being made. As we all know, human trafficking is a structural and social challenge, and this requires sustained multi-sectoral action. Ministries and government agents must embed anti-trafficking priorities into their core strategies, day-to-day operations, ensuring institutional integration and professional accountability, and I reiterate that this is the moment to push for this. Law enforcement officials are required to execute their mandates with diligence, professionalism, and survivor-centered approaches, while communities must engage actively to address systemic vulnerabilities, raise awareness, and support prevention efforts. Continuous monitoring, evaluation, and adaptive management are essential to identifying emerging trends and to respond effectively to changing patterns of exploitation. Complementary measures, including strengthening the rule of law, promoting ethical recruitment practices, enhancing border management, and providing comprehensive survivor services are critical to reinforcing the national response and ensuring interventions are sustainable and responsive to the needs of survivors. This National Strategic Action Plan reflects the strong institutional leadership that has guided its development. I wish to commend the Ministry of Defence for its leadership in steering Sri Lanka's national response to human trafficking through the National Anti-Human Trafficking Task Force. I also acknowledge the member institutions of the task force for their untiring commitment and constructive engagement in advancing this action plan. Further, I express my gratitude to the International Organization for Migration and all partner institutions, civil society, private sector organizations for their continued cooperation in shaping this national framework, and I hope to see the same energy and enthusiasm in the implementation of this strategy. With collective action, steadfast commitment, and a focus on dignity and empowerment of survivors, I am confident that Sri Lanka will continue to make meaningful progress for combating human trafficking. Thank you very much.